20 minutes ago, they were the single best thing that ever happened to you. Right now, you can't remember why you ever felt that way. Nothing remotely catastrophic actually happened in between. A short reply, a canceled plan, a tone of voice you didn't like. And somehow, that one small thing erased every good moment that came before it. Like your brain hit a switch and the whole relationship reloaded from scratch. If you've ever lived inside that exact, disorienting flip, more than once, with more than one person, you already know the real question this video is going to answer. Why can't you hold the good and the bad of someone at the same time? Let's name what's actually happening, because it has a real name and it isn't a character flaw. It's called splitting, and it's one of the oldest, most automatic defense mechanisms your mind has. Splitting means your brain sorts a person into one of two folders, all good or all bad, because holding both folders open at the same time feels unbearable. Not annoying, not inconvenient, unbearable, in a nervous system sense, the way your body treats a genuine threat. So, instead of holding a complicated, mixed, accurate picture of someone, your mind resolves the tension the fastest way it knows how, by picking a side and deleting the other one, at least for now. If this kind of clarity helps your nervous system settle, subscribe. PsychBond is a daily decoder for psychology, relationships, and avoidant and anxious attachment patterns, so you stop guessing. Here's what makes splitting different from just having a bad day or a fair complaint about someone. A fair complaint sits next to the good stuff. You can be annoyed at someone and still remember clearly that you love them and that they're generally good to you. Splitting doesn't work like that. When you're inside it, the good stuff doesn't sit next to the complaint. It disappears entirely, like it never happened. You're not choosing to be dramatic. You genuinely, in that moment, cannot access the memory of them being kind, warm, or safe. It's not buried. It feels erased. And 20 minutes later, when the wave passes, it comes rushing back, and you're left confused about which version of your own feelings was the real one. Let's talk about why this happens specifically if you're anxiously attached, because this isn't random, it's structural. An anxious nervous system is built to scan constantly for signs of danger to the connection. That's the whole engine underneath anxious attachment. Ambiguity is the one thing that engine cannot tolerate well. A person who is mostly wonderful but occasionally careless is informationally an ambiguous signal. Are they safe or not? Can you trust them or not? Your anxious nervous system doesn't like sitting inside that unresolved question because unresolved feels dangerous, feels like standing on ground that could shift under you at any second. So it resolves the ambiguity for you, fast, by force. It picks a category. All good, you're safe, relax. Or, all bad, you're in danger, brace. What it refuses to give you is the actually true, actually complicated answer. Mostly good, sometimes careless, still safe overall. That answer requires tolerating uncertainty, and tolerating uncertainty is exactly the skill an anxious attachment system never got to practice. Before we go further, it helps to know this isn't a personal failing invented by your particular brain, and it isn't proof that something is uniquely wrong with you. Splitting was first described in clinical psychology as something infants do before they're old enough to understand that the same caregiver who feeds them and the same caregiver who occasionally leaves them waiting are, in fact, one single, whole, complicated person. Learning to merge those two experiences into one integrated person is a genuine developmental milestone, and most people build it gradually over childhood without ever noticing the work happening. But the capacity isn't automatically permanent once it's built. Under enough stress, enough fear of loss, enough activation of an anxious attachment system, even a fully grown adult can temporarily drop back into that earlier, simpler, all-or-nothing way of seeing someone. You're not regressing because you're weak. You're regressing because the skill of holding complexity is a nervous system skill. And nervous system skills are the first thing to go offline when the alarm bells start ringing. You can watch this pattern play out in ordinary, specific moments. And once you see it, you'll recognize it everywhere. They show up for you all week. Thoughtful, present, warm. And then, on Friday night, they seem distracted during dinner. And within minutes, you're mentally rewriting the entire week as evidence they never really cared. They remember your coffee order. They text you good morning. They show up when you're sick. And none of that survives contact with one flat tone of voice on a phone call. The good doesn't get weighed against the bad. It gets replaced by it, completely. Like the good evidence was never entered into the record in the first place. Here's the story, and here's the structure underneath it. The story says, "I finally see them clearly. This is who they really are. I was fooling myself before." The structure says something much less flattering and much more useful. You're not seeing them clearly right now. You're seeing them through a nervous system that just got overwhelmed and defaulted to the simplest possible read. Clarity and certainty are not the same thing. Splitting feels like clarity because it's so total, so absolute, so free of the exhausting work of holding two things at once. But total, absolute, effortless certainty about a person you actually know well should be a red flag in itself, not a comfort. Real people are never that simple, which means a reaction that simple is coming from you, not from them. This creates something specific and painful inside relationships, and it's worth naming precisely. The partner on the other end of your splitting has no idea which version of them you're relating to at any given moment. They did something small, maybe genuinely careless, maybe just human, and suddenly they're being treated like the villain of the entire relationship, stripped of every bit of credit for the good week that came before. That's disorienting for them, understandably. And it's exhausting for you too. Because you're not just managing a relationship, you're managing violent internal swings between adoration and something close to disgust, sometimes within the same hour. And neither extreme is giving you an accurate read on the actual person you're with. It's worth being specific about how fast this actually happens, because the speed is part of what makes it so disorienting. This isn't a slow reconsideration that builds over days of noticing a pattern. It's often a single moment, a specific sentence, a specific silence, that flips the entire internal record in seconds. 1 second, you're mid-laugh, feeling closer to them than you have in weeks. The next second, triggered by something as small as them checking their phone while you're talking, the whole warmth collapses, and you're suddenly reviewing the relationship for evidence that it was always going this way. The speed feels like proof that the new read is the honest one, the one that was hiding underneath the good feelings the whole time. It isn't. Speed is a symptom of threat response, not a marker of truth. Let's talk about the nervous system mechanics underneath this, because it isn't willpower and it isn't drama. It's wiring. When you perceive a threat to the relationship, even a small one, your body doesn't reach for nuance. Nuance is slow, effortful, cognitively expensive, and your nervous system in threat mode wants speed, not accuracy. Categorizing someone as simply good or simply bad is fast. It requires no ongoing tracking of contradictory data, no mental effort to hold two opposing truths in the same hand. Your body isn't trying to be fair to the person. It's trying to protect you as efficiently as possible. And efficiency and fairness are not the same goal. This is where a related concept becomes useful: object constancy. The ability to hold on to the felt sense of someone's love and safety even when they're not actively proving it to you in the moment. Splitting and weak object constancy usually travel together. If you can't hold on to the memory of someone's good qualities during a moment of doubt, you also can't access the general trust that would normally cushion a single bad moment. Without that cushion, every disappointment lands at full force, undiluted by everything good that came before it, because the good simply isn't available to you right now. It's not that the good moments didn't matter. It's that your system can't retrieve them on demand the way a more securely wired nervous system can. There's a version of this that gets more complicated once you notice it can run in both directions, not just toward the bad. Some people split upward instead, taking one good moment and using it to erase a pattern of real, repeated disappointment. Deciding that because they felt so loved during one specific dinner, the weeks of feeling neglected before it must not have counted for much after all. This is the same mechanism, just pointed the other way. And it can be just as costly, because it makes it nearly impossible to hold someone accountable for a consistent pattern when one warm gesture is enough to wipe the slate clean in your mind. Whichever direction it runs, the underlying failure is identical: an inability to let two true things about a person coexist without one of them overriding the other. There's a misread happening here that's worth naming precisely, because it keeps people stuck longer than the splitting itself does. You start treating the intensity of your certainty as proof that it's accurate. Because the shift feels so total, so convincing, so undeniable in the moment, you assume your mind must be showing you the truth for the first time, finally, after all that confusing ambivalence. But intensity is not evidence. A feeling can be completely overwhelming and still be completely temporary, completely non-representative of the bigger picture. The most confident you've ever felt about someone being terrible might be happening at the exact moment you're least equipped to judge them fairly, because you're mid-flood, not mid-thought. There's a second misread stacked on top of the first one. You start mistaking the pattern for self-protection, telling yourself that flipping to "they're bad, I need to leave" is you finally standing up for yourself, finally refusing to be taken advantage of. Sometimes, leaving genuinely is the right call. But a decision made from inside a splitting episode isn't self-protection. It's reactivity wearing the costume of self-protection. Real boundary setting comes from a stable, integrated view of someone, weighing the good and the bad together, and deciding what you're willing to accept. Splitting skips the weighing entirely. It's not a boundary. It's a nervous system shortcut that happens to look like one from the outside. There's a third misread, quieter than the other two. You start believing that once the wave passes and the warmth comes back, the splitting episode itself didn't really matter, that it was just a blip, safely forgotten. But your partner remembers it even after you've moved on. And the accumulation of those blips over months teaches them something real. That your view of them is unstable. That they never quite know which version of you they're going to get. That being fully known by you is conditional on you staying regulated. That's not a small cost just because you personally reset quickly. The reset speed is yours. The impact isn't only yours. There's also a cost worth naming that has nothing to do with whether the other person ever finds out about the internal swing at all. Living inside repeated splitting episodes is exhausting in a way that has nothing to do with the relationship's actual quality. Your body doesn't get to rest in a stable, settled read of someone if that read keeps getting demolished and rebuilt every few days. Even a genuinely good relationship can start to feel unstable from the inside if your own nervous system won't let you hold on to the good parts long enough to actually metabolize them as real. You can be loved consistently and still feel like you're constantly relearning that fact from zero, simply because your capacity to retain the evidence keeps getting wiped by whatever the most recent difficult moment was. So what's actually missing here, structurally, when someone can't hold the good and the bad of a person at once? It's the capacity to sit inside ambiguity without resolving it immediately. To let a mixed, complicated, accurate picture of someone stay open instead of forcing it into a clean, false, comfortable category. That capacity isn't something you're born with or without. It's a skill, built the same way any nervous system skill gets built, through repeated, survivable practice of the exact thing that used to feel unbearable. Here's a way to test whether you're in a splitting episode or having a legitimate, proportionate reaction. Ask yourself honestly, in this moment, can I name one good thing about this person without effort, without it feeling fake or forced? If you genuinely cannot, if reaching for a single positive memory feels like reaching into an empty drawer, that's usually the split talking, not an objective read on who they are. A proportionate reaction leaves room for complexity even while you're upset. A splitting episode erases the room entirely. It also helps to notice how this shows up in specific, recurring moments, because the pattern rarely announces itself with a label. It's the friend who was your favorite person on Earth on Tuesday and someone you're ready to cut off entirely by Thursday over something that, described out loud to a stranger, would sound minor. It's rereading old texts from someone during a good phase and feeling almost embarrassed by how much you liked them, as if that version of your feelings was naive. It's the specific vertigo of trying to explain your relationship to a friend and realizing you can't give a consistent answer, because the answer depends entirely on which day you're describing it on. There's a specific relationship stage where this pattern tends to intensify, worth naming because it can feel confusing if you don't expect it. The point where a relationship starts becoming genuinely important to you. Early on, before much is at stake, a careless moment from someone barely registers. Once you're attached, once losing them would actually hurt, the same small, careless moment carries enormous weight, because your nervous system has recalibrated around how much this specific person now matters to your sense of safety. The splitting often gets worse exactly when the relationship gets better. Not because anything about the person changed, but because the stakes did. And higher stakes mean a more trigger-happy threat response standing guard over the whole thing. I want to be careful here, because this isn't a case for tolerating genuine mistreatment just because you're worried about splitting. Some people really are consistently unsafe, and naming a pattern in yourself doesn't mean every negative reaction you have is automatically wrong or automatically about you. The point isn't that your bad moments are always inaccurate. The point is that when the swing is total, instant, and impossible to reconcile with the good you knew was there 10 minutes earlier, that specific shape is worth examining before you act on it. Not because your feelings don't matter, but because that particular shape of feeling has a known tendency to mislead. It's also worth naming what this looks like from the other side, briefly, because understanding the impact on your partner is part of understanding the full shape of the pattern. Someone on the receiving end of repeated splitting often starts walking on eggshells in a very particular way. Not because they're afraid of doing something wrong exactly, but because they've learned that even small, ordinary human moments can suddenly get weighted as proof of something much larger. Over time, some partners start pulling back, giving less of themselves, precisely because the good they offer doesn't seem to reliably stick or count. That withdrawal can then get read, inside another splitting episode, as further proof that they were never really invested, when it may actually be a direct response to how unpredictable it's felt to be fully seen by you. There's a broader pattern worth naming here too, because splitting doesn't only show up in romantic relationships. It shows up with friends, with family, sometimes even with yourself, in the way you can go from feeling like you're doing great to feeling like a complete failure over one mistake, with no middle ground available to you in either direction. If you notice this shape in more than one area of your life, that's useful information. It usually means the root isn't really about any one specific person. It's about how your nervous system handles ambiguity in general. And that's a pattern worth addressing at the source, rather than relationship by relationship. Here's the practical piece, because naming the pattern without a next step just becomes one more interesting fact you nod along to and then live through again the next time it happens. The first move is building a pause between the flip and the reaction to it. You don't have to trust the certainty the moment it arrives. Certainty that shows up instantly, fully formed, with no room for nuance, has earned a little suspicion, not blind obedience. Give it an hour, or even just 10 minutes, before you act on it. Message them something you can't take back, or make a decision that assumes the all-bad version is the true one. The second move is deliberately practicing the opposite of what splitting does, which means, in a calm moment, actually writing down or saying out loud both the good and the bad about someone at the same time, in the same sentence. Something like, "They were distracted at dinner, and they also showed up for me all week." That sentence feels almost uncomfortable to say if you're used to splitting, because it refuses to resolve into one clean category. That discomfort is the muscle you're building. Every time you can hold both halves without collapsing into one, you're teaching your nervous system that ambiguity is survivable, not dangerous. The third move is learning to separate the size of your reaction from the size of the actual event. Ask yourself, plainly, does this specific thing they did warrant the totality of what I'm feeling right now? Or does the totality feel bigger than the event itself? That gap between the size of the trigger and the size of the reaction is usually where the split is hiding. It's not that your feelings are fake. It's that they're responding to something larger than the moment in front of you. Usually, an old fear of abandonment or unworthiness that this small event happened to brush up against. A useful companion to that third move is learning to name the feeling underneath the split before it fully takes over. Out loud, if you can manage it, even just to yourself. Something as simple as noticing, "I feel like I hate them right now, and I know that's not the whole truth," creates a small gap between the feeling and your identification with it. You're not denying the feeling. You're refusing to let it operate as the final, uncontested verdict on who this person is. That single sentence, repeated enough times, is often what starts loosening the grip of the pattern over months, long before the pattern disappears completely. There's a fourth move worth adding, and it's the one most people skip because it requires being honest with someone else in real time instead of just managing the pattern internally. Tell a trusted partner, plainly, that you sometimes swing hard and that you're working on it. Something as simple as, "I might say some things in the heat of a moment that don't reflect how I actually feel about you overall." Gives the people close to you a framework for understanding the swings without either dismissing your feelings entirely or taking every extreme statement as a permanent verdict. It doesn't excuse the impact. It does make the impact more survivable for both of you, while you build the capacity to hold the ambiguity yourself. None of these moves require you to become a different person overnight, and none of them mean pretending the hard moments don't matter. They just ask you to slow down the automatic collapse from complicated to simple long enough to check whether simple was ever actually true. Most of the time, for most people, it wasn't. There's a version of you that's probably already noticed this pattern, quietly, without having language for it before now. The part that's felt the whiplash of loving someone completely and then, within the same day, barely recognizing why. That part of you isn't broken and isn't overly dramatic. It's a nervous system that learned, somewhere along the way, that holding a complicated, mixed truth about someone felt more dangerous than picking a simple, false one. That's a learnable pattern, which means it's also an unlearnable one. Slowly, one held together moment at a time. Not through willpower alone, but through repeated proof to your own nervous system that ambiguity didn't kill you the last 10 times either. You are allowed to feel disappointed by someone without deleting every good thing you know about them in the same breath. You are allowed to sit inside the uncomfortable, unresolved space of a person being both flawed and genuinely good to you, without forcing it into a cleaner story, just because clean feels safer than true. And you are allowed to build the kind of steadiness where a hard moment doesn't have the power to erase an entire relationship's worth of evidence, one flip at a time, until holding both halves of someone stops feeling like a threat and starts feeling like what it actually is. The truest, most accurate way anyone has ever really loved someone. The good and the bad were never actually in competition. Only your nervous system, under pressure, ever made them fight for the same seat. As if there wasn't room enough in one person and one relationship for both to be true at once. If this helped your body feel a little safer, liking this video helps it reach someone else who needs this clarity. Welcome to PsychBond. You're safe here.